The Kamerun Campaign took place in the German colony of Cameroon in the African theatre of the First World War when the British, French and Belgians invaded the German colony from August 1914 to March 1916. Most of the campaign took place in Cameroon, but skirmishes also broke out in British Nigeria. By the spring of 1916, following Allied victories, the majority of German troops and the civil administration fled to the neighboring neutral colony of Spanish Guinea. The campaign ended in a defeat for Germany and the partition of its former colony between France and Britain. Background: Germany had established a protectorate over Cameroon by 1884 during the scramble for Africa. In 1911, France ceded Cameroon, a large territory to the east of Cameroon, to Germany as a part of the Treaty of Fez, the settlement that ended the Agadir crisis. In 1914, the German colony of Cameroon made up all of modern Cameroon as well as portions of Nigeria, Chad, Gabon, the Republic of the Congo and the Central African Republic. Cameroon was surrounded on all sides by Allied territory. British-held Nigeria was to the northwest. The Belgian Congo bordered the colony to the southeast and French Equatorial Africa lay in the east. The neutral colony of Spanish Guinea was bordered by German Cameroon on all sides but one, which faced the sea. In 1914, on the eve of World War I, Cameroon remained largely unexplored and unmapped by European invaders. In 1911–1912, the border with the French colonies of Gabon, Middle Congo, Ubangi Shari and Chad was established, and in 1913 the border between the colonies of Nigeria and Cameroon was defined. The German military forces stationed in the colony at the time consisted of around 1,855 Schutztruppen. However, after the outbreak of war by mid-1915, the Germans were able to recruit an army of around 6,000. Allied forces, on the other hand, in the territories surrounding Cameroon were much larger. French Equatorial Africa alone could mobilize as many as 20,000 soldiers on the eve of war, while British Nigeria to the west could raise an army of 7,550. Operations Invasion in 1914. At the outbreak of war in Europe in early August 1914, the German colonial administration in Cameroon attempted to offer neutrality with Britain and France in accordance with Articles 10 and 11 of the Berlin Act of 1885. However, this was hastily rejected by the Allies. The French were eager to regain the land ceded to Germany in the Treaty of Fez in 1911. The first Allied expeditions into the colony on 6 August 1914 were from the east, conducted by French troops from French Equatorial Africa under General Joseph Gorderi Chimeric. This region was mostly marshland, undeveloped, and was initially not heavily contested by Germans. By 25 August 1914, British forces in present-day Nigeria had moved into Cameroon from 3 different points. They pushed into the colony towards Mora in the far north, towards Garua in the center, and towards Nsanakang in the south. British forces moving towards Garua under the command of Colonel Maclear were ordered to push to the German border post at Tepa near Garua. The first engagement between British and German troops in the campaign took place at the Battle of Tepa, eventually resulting in German withdrawal. In the far north, British forces attempted to take the German fort at Mora but initially failed. This resulted in a long siege of German positions which would last until the end of the campaign. British forces in the south attacking Nsanakang were defeated and almost completely destroyed by German counter-attacks at the Battle of Nsanakang. Maclear then pushed his forces further inland towards the German stronghold of Garua but was repulsed in the First Battle of Garua on 31 August. Naval Operations in September 1914. The Germans had mined the Cameroon or Wuri estuary and scuttled naval vessels there to protect Douala, the colony's largest city and commercial center. British and French naval vessels bombarded towns on the coast and by late September had cleared mines and conducted amphibious landings in order to isolate Douala. On the 27th of September, the city surrendered to Brigadier General Charles McPherson Dobell, commander of the combined Allied force. The occupation of the entire coast soon followed as the French captured more of the territories to the southeast in an amphibious operation at the Battle of Ukoko. War in 1915. By 1915, the majority of German forces, except for those holding out at the strongholds of Mora and Garua, had withdrawn to the mountainous interior of the colony surrounding the new capital, at Janda. In the spring of that year, German forces were still able to significantly stall or repulse assaults by Allied forces. A German force under the command of Captain von Krailsheim from Garua even went on the offensive, engaging the British during a failed raid into Nigeria at the Battle of Gurin. This surprisingly daring incursion into British territory prompted General Frederick Hugh Cunliffe to launch another attempt at taking the German fortresses at Garua at the Second Battle of Garua in June, resulting in a British victory. This action freed Allied units in northern Cameroon to push further into the interior of the colony. This push resulted in the Allied victory at the Battle of Noundra on the 29th of June. Cunliffe's advance south to Janda, however, was stalled by heavy rains, and his force instead participated in the continuing siege of Mora. When the weather improved, British forces under Cunliffe moved further south, capturing a German fort at the Battle of Banjo in November and occupying a number of other towns by the end of the year. By December, the forces of Cunliffe and Dobell were in contact and ready to conduct an assault of Janda. In this year, most of Neu Cameroon was occupied by Belgian and French troops, who also began to prepare for an assault on Janda. Surrender in 1916. In early 1916, the German commander, Karl Zimmermann, came to the conclusion that the campaign was lost. With Allied forces pressing in on Janda from all sides and German resistance faltering, he ordered all remaining German units and civilians to escape to the neutral Spanish colony of Rio Muni. By mid-February of that year, the last German garrison at Mora surrendered, ending the siege of Mora. German soldiers and civilians which had escaped to Spanish Guinea were treated amicably by the Spanish, who had only 180 militiamen in Rio Muni and were unable to forcibly intern them. Most native Cameroonians remained in Muni, but the Germans eventually moved to Fernando Po. Some were eventually transported by Spain to the neutral Netherlands before the war was over. Many Cameroonians, including the paramount chief of the Beti people, moved to Madrid, where they lived as visiting nobility on German funds. Aftermath. In February 1916, before the campaign ended, Britain and France agreed to divide of Cameroon along the Picot Provisional Partition Line. This resulted in Britain obtaining approximately one-fifth of the colony situated on the Nigerian border. France gained Douala and most of the Central Plateau, which consisted of the majority of former German territory. The partition was accepted at the Paris Peace Conference, and the former German colony became the League of Nations Mandates of French Cameroon and British Cameroon by the Treaty of Versailles.